Hi parents, welcome. Let me know if you can actually hear me okay. I mentioned to you guys earlier that I would come back on at this time to talk to you guys about a letter that I received from a judge about a legislative matter that's really going to impact all of the target parents and alienated children, those that are still within the court system. So, if your children are adults, you won't be affected by this, but if your children, if you're still trying to fight for your children in court, this is going to have severe impact on to your case. So before I go into it, I do want to update about the retreats that we are having in February. If you guys been following, we actually changed the date. We just changed the date of the retreat. So I do wanted to kind of just quickly share that with you guys, so that because we heard from parents who was asking us about having trouble getting flights into Vietnam to go to the retreat. So we now have a new date. So the retreat is going to be from February 19th to February 24th. And other than that, the program is still the same. We're going to have 6 days and 5 nights. So, if you look on our Facebook page, you will see the brochure for the program with the program, of the whole program. And and Maura, I got your email, by the way. And if you are flying in one day early, don't worry about it. We'll figure that out. We'll talk to you soon. I will respond to your email. Thank you for that. And really, for any parents, if you're flying in earlier or staying longer, it's not a problem. We can definitely make arrangement for you. We'll talk about that later. But essentially, the program is we wanted to for you to try to reconnect with yourself and connect with others, and then also get a framework so that you can go back more empowered so that you can fight for your children. Now, I know a lot of parents will say that, and this is a concern, some people brought up about the cost. So that we really try to keep the cost down as much as possible. So we actually make no money on this program whatsoever, no money whatsoever. I'm paying my own way to be there. So the cost of the program is $780 per person, and that includes 6 days and 5 nights, including all the local transportation, food, hotel, and we also going to cover your tourist visa and the basic travel insurance. So we're really trying to make sure that we take care of you. The only thing that you have to take care of is really to get yourself to Saigon or Ho Chi Minh City. And then once you're there for the program, the program is going to cover everything within the program. And I know some people think like, oh, I need to keep money and save money to pay for so many things, right? As a target parent, you have so many things that you have to take care of. What I've noticed is that very often target parents forget about actually the most important aspect of fighting is actually taking care of yourself. Like you can go into a court situation and you have no idea how much the lawyer is going to charge you. You have nothing upfront. You have no idea of what the cost is going to be. And at the end of the day, which never come, right? You have no idea how long this thing is going to drag out. But, the lawyers can send you bills that you have no idea how to anticipate for it. And whatever the bill that they write, you are responsible for that bill. So you will do anything you can to fight for your children, but yet you're not taking care of yourself. And yet yourself is actually the most important aspect in this whole thing. Because if you are not strong, whether you choose to fight in court or outside of court, you're not going to be able to win. So this is why it's so important. We're trying our best to keep the cost down. So I hope that this is going to help. We changed the date because we're trying to make sure that the flight is more affordable for you. The reason we chose the date a bit earlier before was actually because I was hoping that you get to see a little bit of the celebration, because it's like right around the New Year time in Vietnam. And the cultural celebration is actually quite special. So I was hoping that you could see some of that, but let's not worry about that. So we moved the date to be 2 weeks later, so you can actually be there with more affordable flights. So I hope you can join me. So that's about enough about the retreat. If you have any question or comment, let me know. The last date to pay for the retreat is the 22nd. at 5 p.m. Pacific time. So, if you do wanted to participate, please, make sure that you get yourself in, or sign up and pay by the 22nd at 5 p.m. Now let's go into the topic of today, which is I received an email from a judge who have spent a lot of time to do research on this particular topic. So if you are familiar with the situation that we as a community are facing, is that there are people that are advocating for victims of domestic violence. Somehow, for some reason, they think that we are the enemy. And it's completely, like, they got this completely wrong. We actually truly supportive of, we are very supportive of victims of domestic violence, because really, you guys, all of you, the targeted parents and the children are victims of domestic violence. We really see parental alienation as a form of domestic violence. So for some reason, the domestic violence community doesn't see it that way. They actually think that parental alienation community are the perpetrator of the violence. So really, it's really unfortunate. So because of that, the community that support victim of domestic violence have been and are pushing for legislations and many other things in order to go against the victims of parental alienation. Now, because of that, they actually successfully pushed through a piece of legislation that is very scary and very dangerous, and it's called the Kayden's law. Now, if you've been following me for a while, you will see that a few months ago, I done a couple of videos where I explained to you why Kayden's law is so bad for victims of parental alienation, because it and Christine, thank you so much. She agreed that it's 100% a form of domestic violence. It's very much so, because really, and it's perpetrated not just on you as a targeted parents, but also to the children. This is a very serious form of domestic violence against both the children and the parents. So anyway, this domestic violence group was able to get a law passed at the federal level that said, essentially, this law, the language is saying that if you go to court and try to fight for your children, the court is not allowed, is prohibited from removing your child from the alienator. Number one. Number two, you are not allowed to get reunification therapy. And number three, judges need to be trained by domestic violence group. And you know what domestic violence group been saying? They're saying parental alienation is pseudoscience, that is not real, and that people that talking about parental alienation and the people that perpetrated violence. So that's what they're gonna get the judges to be trained on. Judges gonna train to learn that parental alienation is not real, and they will not be there to protect children that have been alienated and parents that are trying to fight for their children. So this is outrageous. And for some reason, they were able to pass that piece of legislation without due process. So this is called the Kayden's law. And what it said in the Kayden's law, like in addition to what I just talked to you guys about, which is you're not allowed, the courts are prohibited from removing the child from the alienator to give the child to you, and you're not allowed to get reunification therapy, and judges have to learn from this group of people who do not believe in parental alienation. In addition to that, it also said, here is a big bucket of money, huge amount of money, and all the state has to pass the same law. And if you pass the same law in a state, then the state will get a big lot of money out of this big bag of money. It's going to be split up, and every state is going to get a big piece of this pie. And so that's the law. It was passed not last year, in March. So this is just devastating. Mariska said, I don't consider there is more harmful form of family violence than parental alienation. I absolutely agree with you. There's nothing more devastating than parental alienation, because it really, it's just like cover every aspect of trauma that you could potentially perpetrate on someone. And it's like really getting into, like, it destroying families at all levels. And we're not just talking about target parents or alienated children. There's grandparents, there's that whole side of families that are being destroyed. And then we have this whole other side of family and friends that are getting twisted information and completely false narrative, and they believe that and they fall for that. And we have this whole system that working against, what is best interest. And then we're destroying this whole future generation because of that. And we saw Dean. Thank you so much, Dean. Dean wrote, "Hang in there, targeted parents. You will get your child back eventually." I did, and thank you, Dr. Petra, for fighting for us. Dean, that's amazing that you got your child back. I would love to hear your story. Thank you so much for saying that. Yeah. So anyway, so I was very concerned about this law, and as you know, like we were fighting so hard for a number of states, and we were actually successful. And I actually had so many kind of conversation with. I think I met over 100 judges around the country to talk about this and ask them to support us. And I talked to so many legislators, both at the federal level and the state level. And I traveled to so many places to try to fight this. And I'm not talking about being alone, but we had a team behind this that was helping. So I'm really grateful for everyone that was a part of that. And so, but it's not over, because legislative sessions are opening up in many states. So we are expecting to see this law in many, many more states. So we actually created a formal political action committee called Respectfully PAC, which is led by Claudia. If you guys know, Claudia has been really an amazing advocate. So she's the chair of the political action committee called Respectfully PAC, and she's going to lead the effort from here on to fight against the Kayden's law. But anyway, so I was talking to a lot of judges, and I had multiple conversations with this particular judge, and her name is Doris Pecuro. So Judge Pecuro, I had this many conversations with her, and she was very helpful in guiding me in different things and introduced me to various different people. But anyway, so she decided to create a formal letter in writing so that I was allowed to publish this letter that she sent to me. So I wanted to share that with you guys, because what she did is she had gone through and trying to explain the misinformation and the how legislators have been manipulated by different advocates group in domestic violence advocate group, have manipulated information and data and managed to control the media and manipulate the legislator in order to pass this law that is completely really bad for families. So I'm going to walk through that letter. Let me just share screen with you guys so you can actually see what I'm talking about. Let me just see where it is. Okay, found it. All right, so this is her letter to me. Okay, so let's just kind of read that together. Let's make sure it's big enough for you to read. Okay, so dear Dr. Deeter, okay, I am responding to your request for input about legislative interference in child custody matters and issues with which I became involved when the Pennsylvania Senate passed a bill known as Kayden's law. By the way, they did not pass. They presented a bill, which will amend the state custody code. It passed by the House of Representatives. Yeah, so they didn't pass a bill. They presented a bill. And by the way, like I said, this then become the federal bill, and that bill was passed without a due process, and now it actually became a law at the federal level. And now they're trying to push this law through every state. Okay, so the legislation stemmed from the tragic killing of an 8-year-old child by her father during a period of custody, for which tragedy, the press, and advocates blamed the judge, who had done nothing wrong and had entered a careful and considerate order after hearing all the evidence. Now, during that particular custody hearing, there was no testimony that anyone had concerns about the child's safety with her father, who had had regular periods of custody with the child for years, as arranged between the mother and the fathers. So, the mother and the father agreed to a certain arrangement, and So the judge actually reduced the father custody time from 4 to 1 day on alternating weekends to limit the child exposure to father's angry outbursts to other persons, of which there was a record. But none of the press coverage provided accurate information about the hearings, even though the transcript was made available to the public. Okay, so the court case was nothing like what was portrayed in the press. They actually manipulate the media to present a completely different story, to try to make it seem like the judge is responsible for the death of this child. Okay, so and then she wrote, significantly, neither the state nor any county bar association nor any agency that advocates for families and children in the state supported the legislation because of the problematic provision fashioned by the legislature, such as mandating professional supervised custody without any regards as to its availability in any given county or the inability for the parties to pay. All right. I wanted to also mention a little bit more about that custody case because we got a chance to walk through that case. Even this judge also helped me. She also gone through all the transcript and the whole case docket. And so I wanted to kind of explain a little bit more about that case. So that case, that custody case, the mother put in a request and asking the judge for a certain custody arrangement, and the judge gave her exactly what she asked for. Right? Exactly what she asked for. So there's no reason for anyone to later then complain and say the judge failed, because the judge did exactly what you asked and reducing the custody time of the father from 4 days out to 1 day. And yet they turn around and said the system failed her. And that's a problem. Okay, so let's continue with this letter. This judge wrote to me. The chief sponsor of the bill capitalized upon erroneous and misleading statistic, and she quotes statistic because it's not statistics, this is a made-up data, disseminated by organizations such as the Center for Judicial Excellence, which has tracked the killing of children by parents dating back to 2008, currently 872 in numbers. Okay, so this law was passed because groups like Center for Judicial Excellence had created misleading and erroneous data to manipulate the legislators and the media. Okay, notwithstanding that only 118 of these tragedies, so about 13% had some court involvement. The website has its mission to protect vulnerable children in the family court system and to strengthen the integrity of all courts by creating judicial accountability, totally overlooking the vulnerability of 86.5% of homicide victims. So, even though they track these 872 children homicide cases, 86% of them doesn't have any court involvement whatsoever, but yet they try to claim that they protect children, but really only 13% has some court involvement. Now let's go into that court involvement data a little bit. Okay, had anyone with the center actually researched the court involved cases, they would have seen that the 5 child homicide in Pennsylvania, for example, that had some court involvement out of the total of 33 such homicide dating back to 2009, none of the tragedies was attributable to any court having placed a child in a harm way as claimed by this agency. So this agency is trying to claim the court for the death, and that's why they push the legislation, because they're saying, oh, the court is responsible, the court is putting children in dangerous parents, therefore we have to pass this law that said, when parents go and fight for their children, you cannot remove the child from the alienator and give it to the targeted parent, and you cannot go through reunification therapies because children are now being put back to dangerous parents, which is the targeted parents. Okay, let's continue with this letter. She wrote, one child was killed during a period of supervised custody. two siblings were killed during a period of custody agreed upon between the parties, and one child was killed as a result of a suicide pact orchestrated by parental grandmother and father to prevent mothers from having her scheduled period of custody. And the fifth case was the child Kayden, as discussed above. So, like she was saying, none of this has anything to do with the court. The court actually did the right thing in this situation. So what this center has done is they presented erroneous data and tried to make it seem like, oh, the court is a problem, and therefore we have to push this law through really quickly and irresponsibly. Gosh, I can't even say that word. Irresponsibly. Is that right? I don't know. But the point is, they passed this law without due process, and now it became the federal law, and they try to push this through every state now using this false information. Okay, let's continue. The chief sponsor of Kayden's law accused the courts of failing to read signs of domestic abuse and awarding custody or unsupervised visitation to an abuser 81% of the time based upon the review of 4,000 domestic court cases without citing any authority. So, they just throw in just made up data without any citation for any references or anything like that. Court records show that claim in preposterous, court records show that claim is preposterous and has no basis in reality. So, and for people that have been fighting in legislation and fighting for victims of parental alienation, we are so familiar with this, is that we are dealing with people that will willingly make up false data and information to go against science, and then really trying to bulldoze victims of parental alienation by perpetrating this false information, accusing victims of parental alienation being the perpetrator of violence. It's really outrageous. Okay, according to annual reports of the Administrative Office of Pennsylvania Court, approximately 512,000 custody orders have been entered since 2009, compared with 151,920 protection from abuse orders entered between 2010 and 2020, the majority of which do not involve parties with children. In fact, a review by court staff of 347 custody cases scheduled for a hearing in Philadelphia in early 2021 showed that only 49 cases, which is 14% of these 347 cases, had some form of protection from abuse informant, where 18 had current protection order, 22 had expired protection order, and 9 cases of domestic petition was pending. In addition, Westlaw Next, which is a database for court cases, like if you wanted to search for court cases, you go to Westlaw. So in addition, a Westlaw Next search of approximately 9,000 custody appeals filed in the Pennsylvania Superior Court. And by the way, this judge is from Pennsylvania. That's why she's focusing on, her research has been focused on Pennsylvania specifically. But what's going on right now is impacting the federal level and all the states. It doesn't matter which state you are in the US. And so, sorry, let's continue. In addition, a Westlaw Next search of approximately 9,000 custody appeals filed in the Pennsylvania Superior Court during the past 40 years show that a claim about a protection from abuse matter was raised in only 147 cases, 170 out of 9,000. And in only 7 cases did the party filing the appeal complain that an abusive party was awarded primary, joint, or partial custody. But such fact-based, reliable information was never considered by the legislator and is wholly ignored by advocacy agencies. So these are the domestic violence groups, such as the Center for Judicial Excellence. Unfortunately, the misinformation was incorporated in the Federal Violence Against Women Act this year when the Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick followed the lead of the state senator who has sponsored Kayden's law and made it a part of the federal legislation, specifically this section title, actually it's the title 15 of the act, not 14, not 16. Okay, section of the act said that empirical research, and she questioned, And we have the same question. Where do you get this data from? Where do you get this information from? Because they did not provide any citation. And when we have meeting with legislators, we actually ask, where does this data come from? And they vaguely said, oh, it comes from our internal research. There's no backup for the data. Empirical research indicates that allegations of child physical and sexual abuse are regularly discounted by court when raised in child custody cases, with fewer than 1/4 of claim that a father had committed child physical or sexual abuse believed. And that's a problem, because this here, we are very familiar with where this data come from. It came from erroneous, ridiculous studies that was not peer reviewed and being pushed and perpetrated through by the domestic violence group to try to create this false narrative against victims of parental alienation. Okay, so her question, in what more are allegations of sexual abuse of a child raised and litigated in family court as opposed to the criminal court? And in most jurisdictions, allegations of child abuse are handled by child protective services in separate court proceedings, not in child custody hearing. This, we do know that, yeah. When there was sexual or physical abuse, it should get, usually CPS get involved, and it should get some kind of criminal hearing. Okay, so paragraph 8 of section 1602 further state that more than 100 of the 800 children murdered in United States in custody disputes. And she said clearly this came from the Center of Judicial Excellence, are known to have occurred after a court order the child into contact with the dangerous parent over the objection of a safe parent or caregiver. Yet no such court order was made in the 5 Pennsylvania child homicide cases, and it cannot be said that the center review any transcripts or court proceeding in these 100 cases as opposed to making this blanket unsupported claims about the court. And that's the thing, because they will not, these advocates will not go into real information because they make up this erroneous information to try to manipulate the system. Okay, Title 16 has also provisions that link federal funding to requirements the court take and refrain from taking certain action in custody cases, with no caveat whatsoever specifying that the totality of evidence and determination of credibility must first be made in clear violation of the due process. Yeah, they had this blanket statement that you cannot remove a child from an alienator and you cannot get reunification therapy, without any consideration of the due process. And that's what this judge is writing. We have the same opinion. And needless to say, not a single penny is designated to fund facility where supervised visitation can occur to provide protection for the child when one parent has been shown to perpetrate domestic violence against the other parent. So yeah, funding only going to be directed to the domestic violence groups, but not to the supervised visitation. Because yeah, if you're looking into the federal law that already passed, the way that it's written, the funding is earmarked to go entirely, that big bag of money that I was talking to you about is going to all go to the domestic violence groups. Okay, as a recently retired Philadelphia family court judge, I spent almost 18 years in family court where, on a regular basis, I heard and saw scenarios where that were astonishing and disturbing. It was often challenging to determine who was telling the truth, particularly where there was no objective evidence to show anything one way or another. Fortunately, in one case, a court video camera showed the child's claim of inappropriate sexual conduct by a parent was false, and in another case, the parent's cell phone video showed the child was enjoying himself with relatives during a custody visit and was not locked away in a room as he testified in court. In both instances, the custodial parent had clearly been influencing the child, which both state and federal versions of Kayden's law assume never occurs. And that's the thing, is that we know that children can be brainwashed. That's why there are alienated children, the children that been impacted by parental alienation. But Kayden's law refused to recognize that parental alienation is real, that children can be brainwashed. Has there been no independent evidence to show that the children were lying, and had I concluded they were not telling the truth? When I entered the custody decision, both Kayden's law and Title 16 of the Violence Against Women Act would have condemned my decision as failing to protect the children. So she did the right thing by protecting alienated children, but this law would say that she had failed to protect the children, but she actually did the right thing to protect the alienated children. So in summary, neither state nor federal legislation should be enacted to dictate how child custody cases are handled when such legislation is based upon press accounts and research promulgated. What does this mean? What does this word mean? I actually don't understand this word. By self-serving agency. Let me just look up this word for 1 second. I'm so sorry. I do not understand this word. Promulgated. Promote or make widely known. Okay, promoted. All right, thank you. So let's just read this again. In summary, neither state or federal legislation should be enacted to dictate how child custody cases are handled when such legislation is based upon press accounts and research promoted by self-serving agencies, to the exclusion of trial transcript and court records made available to the public, which contradicts the press accounts and the research. So yeah, so these people are creating this media and promote these fake data that completely against the fact, which is shown in the trial transcript and court records. So she's saying that neither state or federal legislation should pass the law based on really bad information like this. So it is ironic how this agency, advocacy agency and legislator claim that judges do not know this, and that when neither members of the agency nor legislator have spent any time observing child custody hearings or reviewing trial transcript, right? So had they done so, they would have realized that while there are exceptions, majority of family court judges are dedicated civil servants whose challenges and responsibility are unique among all the various facets of the law, and that they should be provided with resources that help them meet their responsibility in determining what is in the best interest of the child. And so this is from the Honorable Doris Pecuro. So anyway, that's the email, that's a letter that she sent to me. I wanted to share that with you guys to show that what we've been talking to you guys about, which is there are a community of people that claim to be advocates for victims of domestic violence are actually going out of their ways, using really dirty tactics, creating false narrative, and bulldozing victims of parental alienation in ways that not much different from how you are being trashed on by the alienator at the individual level. This group of people are creating false data and manipulate the media and manipulate the legislator to pass laws that are very dangerous. So these laws are heading to your state. And if it passes in your state, you are going to have trouble fighting for your children. So what I would say is, I wanted you to become aware of the data and the information, and that our opinion is not just ours, that even judges see things the same way. So I want you to reach out to your local legislators and let them know where you stand with this sort of information. If you want a copy of this letter, let me know. I will talk to her about that title. It's actually title 15. She said title 16, but it's actually, I'm pretty sure, let me double check. But I wanted her to fix that. But then other than that, I'm happy to share the letter with you guys. So if you wanted to send it to your, state legislators, if you wanted to send it to your judges or whatever, it's entirely up to you. I'm happy to share this with you guys. And then I'm going to come back and talk to you guys another time about the UN, because the UN is also being influenced by the same group of people. And again, they are trying to bulldoze victims of parental alienation. And all of this, I know that you are already overwhelmed trying to deal with your personal cases, but while you're not paying attention, when something big like this go through, it can impact you and everybody else as well. So it really requires everybody to be alert and speak up, because the more of you guys speak up, the better chance for us to fight back. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you so much for being here. I know it's kind of an odd time for me to be on. So, thank you for you guys for watching, and I will see you guys again very soon. Please help me by liking and share this video. And then If you are not already on our mailing list, please sign up on our mailing list on victimtohero.com website. And if you're planning to go to the retreat, please do sign up soon, because we're going to close the registration by the 22nd. And really, I hope that you take care of yourself. This retreat is designed to help you take care of yourself. Rebecca said, thank you for all you do. Thank you so much, Rebecca. Really, so please join us, because I really hope to hang out with you guys and meet with you, and we can go through and trying to, help you understand the dynamic in parental alienation, the power imbalance between you and the alienator, and how do you communicate with your children. These are the topics that we're going to work through, but it's also for a chance for you to reconnect with yourself, to find your power, so that when you go back, you can actually fight for your children. So talk soon. Okay, take care.